For nearly 2 years, the Pioneer has been trying to draw your attention to the fact that the war is not limited to the front lines. What happens behind the front line also has the ability to change the fate of the war to a great extent. We have been talking about behind the front line. We are, of course, talking about behind the battlefield. The Ukrainian armed forces are well aware of this fact. Therefore, the operational activities of the Ukrainian army are concentrated in these areas. Hello, the Pioneer viewers. I'm here again with a new report. Ukrainian artillery units, which have gained a lot of experience since the beginning of the war, managed to stir the Russian army again with a new operation. Ukrainian artillery units responded heavily to the ongoing attacks on the Russian army on the Donetsk front line, where the war intensified. This attack may not directly affect the conflict area. However, the conflict area will be indirectly affected by this attack. So, what are the details of the operations? Let's take a look at the developments together. As the Pioneer team, we continue to carry the Russia-Ukraine war to your screens. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so as not to miss our daily map reports and reports on the agenda. I also read all your comments on our videos. Please continue to express your opinions about our content in the comments. Let's start if you are ready. The Pioneer reports. As we mentioned in the introduction, in recent days the war has largely intensified on the Donetsk front line, so much so that the Ukrainian armed forces had to transfer their troops from some regions to this front line. The Ukrainian defense, especially around Avdiivka, is still strongly resistant despite all the attacks of the Russian army. Furious clashes are taking place in the region. In order for the Russian army to destroy the defense here, it must keep the Ukrainian armed forces under the constant fire. The defense here can only be destroyed if there is a sufficient Russian firepower. One of the most important means to provide this firepower is tanks. We have mentioned this many times in our previous reports. The Donetsk region is known as a tank graveyard due to the heavy tank losses suffered by the Russian army. Here, the Ukrainian army managed to destroy many tanks with the drone attacks, ATAGM attacks, and the sabotage attacks from the short distances. In fact, the Russian army recently lost one of its most modern tanks in this region. At the end of our report, we will evaluate the latest data on these losses of the Russian army. Of course, tanks need to be destroyed. These tanks can be kept away from the front line in a different way. What is needed for tanks to move and take an active role on the front line? Fuel. Of course, this fuel must be located close to the front line. Only in this way will the tanks be able to move and operate continuously. This is exactly where the Ukrainian armed forces came into play. According to the reports of local sources, a fuel depot that provides fuel to the tanks and armored vehicles of the Russian army was located in the occupied Makiivka. Again, according to the reports of local sources, the Russian army had just allocated this depot. Apparently, there was a fuel shortage in the Russian army and the decision was taken to allocate a new depot. However, it is likely that the Ukrainian army obtained information about the decision to allocate this depot through intelligence. Makiivka region started the day with a serious explosion sound in the morning. Having detected the location of the fuel depot, Ukrainian artillery units immediately made preparations for firing and carry out a very successful shooting. The fuel tank was hit with a shot fired by the Ukrainian artillery units. Of course, the fuel here reacted due to the explosive contacts and a big fire broke out. Allegedly, the fuel tank was completely burnt to ashes. The Russian fire brigade in the area intervened in the fire. However, the firefighters' intervention did not yield results because the fuel and the tank caught fire, making their work difficult. In addition, the wind in the region was constantly increasing the fire. Both the fuel tank and all the fuel in it were destroyed by the artillery units of the Ukrainian armed forces. According to the Russian sources, there is a great panic in the region, and again, residents in the region are reacting against the Russian administration. Russian official sources preferred not to make any statements on the subject. We think that the Russian attacks in the region will be disturbed. So every warehouse and every point here is very important. In addition, according to some information, the Ukrainian army is said to have targeted some strategic routes while the missiles salvo against the warehouse continues. In addition, according to some information, the Ukrainian army is said to have targeted some strategic routes while the missile salvo against the warehouse continues. However, we have not yet received any confirmed information on this subject. Actually, this attack doesn't just affect tanks. So let's put it this way. What are among the things that the Russian army and the leadership of the Russian Federation are constantly propagandizing? Air defense systems, right? However, the Ukrainian artillery also manages to overcome these systems. This is how the claims that the Russian air defense systems are very successful are refuted. This is how the claims that the Russian air defense systems are very successful are refuted. In this way, the sense of the trust in the Russian administration, which is quite low, is decreasing day by day. Another remarkable report is related to the Kherson front line. We try to express this frequently both in our map reports and in our reports on the agenda. Every event on the Kherson front line is very important. This region has a quality that can shape the fate of the front line. In particular, the operations of the Ukrainian Marines in Krinky region of the Kherson front line wears out the Russian troops in the region. We will touch on this in a moment. Russian sources are still angry that the Russian leadership is not paying due attention to the Kherson front line. What did Russian sources complain about in the previous reports on the Kherson front line? The main ones were artillery and fire support, right? Now they claim that parts of this problem has been corrected. However, this time it seems that there is a shortage of unmanned aerial vehicles. According to the claims of the Russian sources, unmanned aerial vehicles of the Ukrainian armed forces are constantly active on the front line. In this way, the Ukrainian army can follow every region, monitor every movement of the Russian army, and create an attack plan accordingly. However, according to the Russian sources, the Russian army lacks this ability. Therefore, claiming that the Russian army is blind, Russian sources say that the Russian war leadership should provide urgent support to the Kherson front line. In fact, one of the Russian sources on this subject has a claim that humiliates the Russian administration. That claim is as follows. They have money to spend on everything, but they don't have money to provide drone support. If the war leadership has no money, I can give them money to pay for all the drones for the army. So what the war leadership can film more demonstration videos. We said that we would talk about the losses of the Russian army. According to the latest data, the losses of the Russian army are as follows. 338,120 military personnel, 5,632 tanks, 1,519 armored vehicles, 8,000 artillery systems, 919 multiple rocket launcher systems, 605 air defense systems, 6,136 unmanned aerial vehicles, 324 combat aircraft, 324 helicopters, 1,585 cruise missiles, 22 warship and assault boats, 1 submarine, 1,598 vehicles and fuel tanks, 1,159 special equipments. So what do you think? Do you think the Ukrainian artillery will continue its successful operations? What do you think about the Russian army's drone crisis? Let me know in the comments. I read and care about all your comments.